They said she killed him, poisoned him in cold blood. And when Elara Vance walked through those ballroom doors after 5 years of exile, every head turned, every whisper sharpened into a blade. The widow in black, the woman who destroyed her own husband. But standing at the top of the marble staircase, watching her with eyes like winter frost, was the one man who could ruin her completely, or save her. Duke Rowan Ashford, the man she'd loved, the man she'd left behind. And tonight, he would make a choice that would shatter everything. Stay with us until the end to see how this story unfolds. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. The carriage wheels ground to a halt outside Ashford Manor, and Elara Vance felt her heart slam against her ribs like a prisoner testing the bars. 5 years. 5 years since she'd last stood on this ground, since she'd breathed this air thick with old money and older secrets. The estate loomed before her, all gray stone and sharp angles, windows glinting like suspicious eyes in the late afternoon sun. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. "Ma'am?" The driver's voice cut through her thoughts. "Shall I help you down?" Elara looked at her gloved hands, clenched so tight in her lap that her fingers ached. Black gloves, black dress, black veil. The uniform of widowhood, though she wore it less like mourning and more like armor. "No." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I can manage." She could always manage. That's what 5 years of hell taught you. The door opened, and she stepped down onto gravel that crunched like breaking bones beneath her feet. The manor's front entrance stood 50 yards away, and it might as well have been 50 miles. Every step toward it felt like walking toward her own execution, but she'd come too far to turn back now. The butler who answered her knock was new, young, with the kind of pristine uniform that meant he hadn't worked here long enough to know the scandals. Good. That made one person in this entire estate who might look at her without seeing a murderer. "I'm here to see the Duke," Elara said, and was proud her voice didn't shake. The butler's eyes widened slightly. "Do you have an appointment, ma'am?" "No." "I'm afraid His Grace doesn't receive. Tell him Elara Vance is here." She lifted her veil, letting him see her face fully. Let him see the woman the newspapers had torn apart, whose name was still whispered in scandal sheets across 3 counties. "Tell him I've come home." The color drained from the butler's face. Oh, so he had heard of her after all. I'll inquire if His Grace is available." He left her standing in the entrance hall, not even invited her to wait in a proper receiving room, she noticed. That's how toxic her name had become. Even the servants treated her like disease. The hall was exactly as she remembered. The same marble floors polished to a mirror shine, the same tapestries depicting Ashford ancestors in various states of noble triumph, the same cold, careful perfection that had once made her feel so small, so out of place, so desperately in love with a man she could never truly have. Footsteps echoed from the eastern corridor, measured, precise. She knew those footsteps. Rowan Ashford appeared like a storm given human form. He'd aged, but not in the way that diminished. The years had carved him sharper, harder, all edges and severity. His dark hair was cut shorter than she remembered, emphasizing the brutal angles of his face. Those eyes, gray as January ice, locked onto her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He wore no jacket, just a white shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows, as if she'd interrupted him in the middle of working. There was ink on his right hand. Somehow that small detail, that proof he was human, that he still worked with his own hands, made her want to cry. She swallowed the impulse down hard. "Elara." Her name in his mouth after 5 years. It shouldn't have affected her. It did. "Your Grace." Formal, distant, safe. Something flickered across his face. Anger maybe, or pain. With Rowan it was always hard to tell. He'd perfected the art of revealing nothing. "What are you doing here?" Not "how are you" or "I thought you were dead" or any of the things a normal person might say. Just straight to the point, cold as the stone walls surrounding them. "I need your help." He laughed, actually laughed, though there was no humor in it. "My help," after 5 years of silence. "After you married Gerald Vance and disappeared into the countryside, after—" He stopped himself, jaw working like he was chewing on words too bitter to spit out. You have extraordinary nerve, I'll give you that. Gerald is dead. The words dropped between them like a stone into still water. Rowan's expression didn't change. I know. I read the papers. A tragic accident, they said. Fell from his horse, broke his neck. His eyes narrowed. Though others say different, don't they? There it was. The real reason she couldn't just disappear quietly into widowhood and obscurity. They say I killed him. Elara met his gaze head on, refusing to flinch. They say I poisoned him, drove him mad, pushed him down the stairs myself, depends which scandal sheet you read. Did you? The question hung in the air between them, sharp as a blade. Elara felt something crack inside her chest, some last fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, Rowan would be different, that he would know her well enough, even after all this time, to not have to ask. If you have to ask, she said quietly, then I've already lost. She turned toward the door. This had been a mistake, a desperate, foolish mistake. She should have known better than to come here, to think that, wait! His hand caught her elbow, and the touch sent electricity racing up her arm. She froze. I didn't say I believed them, Rowan said, voice lower now, rougher. But I need to hear it from you. Did you kill Gerald Vance? Elara turned back to face him. He was close now, close enough that she could smell cedar and ink and something else, something that was purely him, unchanged despite the years. No, she said. I didn't kill my husband, but I'm not sorry he's dead. Rowan's eyes searched her face, looking for lies, for cracks, for something. She let him look. She had nothing left to hide. Why come to me? He asked finally. Why not hire a solicitor? Clear your name through proper channels? Because proper channels are controlled by men like Gerald. Men like his brother. Men who would rather see me hang than admit one of their own was a monster. She pulled her arm free from his grip, needing the distance to say what came next. Because tomorrow night there's a ball. The Ashford Ball. The biggest social event of the season, and every person who's ever whispered my name will be there. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You want to attend? I want to face them. All of them. I want to walk through those doors and show them I'm not afraid anymore. She lifted her chin. But I can't do it alone. If I show up without protection, without someone powerful enough to make them think twice, they'll tear me apart. So you want me to be your shield. I want you to stand beside me while I prove them all wrong. Rowan was silent for a long moment, studying her with that unreadable expression she'd never quite learned to decipher. The ball is invitation only, he said finally, and my mother controls the guest list. Elara's heart sank. Lady Ashford, the woman who'd made it perfectly clear years ago that Elara would never be worthy of her son. The woman who'd smiled so sweetly while delivering the social death blow that had sent Elara running into Gerald Vance's arms. I see, Elara said. Then I'm sorry I wasted your time. I didn't say no. Hope flared, dangerous and bright. But my mother doesn't control me anymore. Something hard and bitter edged his words. She hasn't for years. If I want you at that ball, you'll be there. Consequences be damned. The consequences could be severe. For you, I mean. Your reputation? My reputation is built on being impossible to manipulate and refusing to bend to social pressure. This won't change that. He stepped closer again, and this time she didn't retreat. But I need to understand what we're walking into. Tell me everything, not the newspaper version, the truth. So she did. They moved to his study, a room she'd never been allowed in before, back when she was young and hopeful and stupid enough to think love conquered all. He poured her brandy without asking if she wanted it, then settled into the chair behind his desk with the kind of controlled grace that spoke of rigid discipline. Start at the beginning, he said. The beginning. Elara took a sip of brandy, felt it burn down her throat. The beginning was when I left you. You married him 3 weeks after you disappeared. 3 weeks, Elara. The old wound in his voice made her chest ache. It wasn't what you think, she said quietly. I didn't leave you for him. I left you because your mother gave me a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Rowan's hand tightened on his glass. Explain. She came to me after that night, you remember, the night we were caught in the garden, the night we were indiscreet. Heat flooded her cheeks despite everything. Even after all these years, all that pain, the memory of his hands on her skin, his mouth on hers, still had the power to undo her. She said there would be a scandal, that my family's reputation would be destroyed, that your reputation would be damaged, that the only way to fix it was for me to disappear. So you married the first man who'd have you? No. Elara's voice hardened. I tried to disappear quietly. I went to my aunt's house in Cornwall, planned to stay there until everything blew over. But Gerald, he found me. He said he'd been interested in me for months, that he didn't care about scandal or reputation, that he'd marry me immediately, give me his name, his protection. And you believed him? I was 19 years old, Rowan. Ruined, alone. My own mother wouldn't speak to me. My father had disowned me. And you, she had to stop, swallow hard. You never came for me. I waited. Every day I waited for you to show up and tell me we'd find another way, but you never did. Rowan's face had gone pale. I didn't know where you'd gone. Mother said you'd left London, but she wouldn't tell me where. I searched for months. While I was standing in a church in Cornwall, marrying a stranger who promised me safety. Elara laughed, but it came out broken. He kept his promise, in a way. For the first 6 months, he was everything he'd promised to be. Kind, gentle, patient, and then the real Gerald showed himself. She took another drink, needing the courage. He was sick, Rowan, in his mind. The doctors had words for it, but I don't know if those words matter. What mattered was that he saw things that weren't there, heard voices, had fits of rage that came from nowhere and went nowhere, and he was convinced, absolutely convinced, that I was trying to kill him. The study was silent, except for the ticking of the clock on the mantel. He accused me constantly, Elara continued, voice flat now, telling it like a story that had happened to someone else. Said I was poisoning his food, claimed I'd hired assassins, locked me in my rooms for days at a time because he was certain I'd stab him in his sleep. His family, they believed him, or pretended to. Either way, they started watching me too, treating me like I was dangerous. And no one helped you? Who would? I was nobody. He was Gerald Vance, third son of an earl with money and connections and a family who wanted to protect their name. When I tried to leave, his brother caught me, dragged me back, told me if I tried to run again, they'd have me committed to an asylum. She met Rowan's eyes. And they could have, would have. All it took was 2 doctors' signatures, and Gerald's brother had enough money to buy whatever signatures he needed. Rowan's knuckles were white around his glass. How did he die? He fell. That part is true. Elara's voice didn't waver. We were arguing. He was having one of his episodes, screaming about how I'd cursed him, how I was a witch sent to destroy him. He lunged at me, lost his balance, went over the railing, broke his neck on the marble floor below. So it was an accident. Yes, but there were no witnesses except the servants, and the servants were loyal to his family, not to me. And when his brother found the body, he looked at me and said, "You finally did it. You killed him." And that was that. The story was set before the body was even cold. Rowan stood abruptly, paced to the window, stared out at the darkening grounds. Why didn't they have you arrested? Because a trial would mean scandal, would mean admitting Gerald was mad, would mean questions about why they'd left me alone with him if they truly believed I was dangerous. Elara watched his rigid shoulders, the tension in every line of his body. So they made a different choice. They let me leave, but they made sure everyone knew what I'd done, or what they said I'd done, spread the rumors, fed the papers, made sure my name was poison. And you've been hiding ever since. Yes, in a cottage in Scotland, living on what little money I'd managed to save. No friends, no family, nothing. She stood too, moved toward him, though she knew it was dangerous. Until I decided I was done hiding, done letting them control my life, done being afraid. Rowan turned to face her, and the look in his eyes was something fierce and dark and almost frightening. If I stand with you tomorrow night, he said slowly, you understand what that means? I'll be declaring publicly that I believe you, that I'm on your side against some of the most powerful families in England. They'll retaliate. I know. They'll try to destroy me too. I know. That's why I'll understand if I'm going to do it anyway, Rowan cut her off. Not because I owe you, not because of what we were, but because I've spent the last 5 years building power specifically so I could use it when it mattered. This matters. Elara felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. Why? Because you're right. Men like Gerald Vance, men like his brother, they've held power too long, used it to hurt people and called it propriety, used it to destroy lives and called it protecting their family name. I'm tired of it. He moved closer, and suddenly they were inches apart, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker gray in his eyes. And because I've spent 5 years wondering what happened to you, hating you for leaving, hating myself for letting you go. If I'd known, if I'd had any idea, you couldn't have known. I should have tried harder. His hand came up, hesitated, then gently touched her cheek, the first soft touch she'd felt in 5 years. I should have torn London apart stone by stone until I found you. Elara closed her eyes, let herself have this moment of weakness, of wanting. It's not your fault. Maybe not, but I can help you now. We'll go to the ball tomorrow. We'll face them together, and if anyone tries to hurt you, his voice went deadly quiet. They'll have to go through me first. The next morning brought rain, which seemed appropriate. Elara stood at the window of the guest room Rowan had insisted she use, watching water stream down the glass, and tried not to think about what tonight would bring. A knock at the door made her turn. Come in. It wasn't a servant. It was Rowan's younger sister, Charlotte. Elara had met her once, years ago, when Charlotte was barely 14. Now she was 19, tall and elegant and carrying a dress box. Oh, Elara said. I didn't expect... Rowan told me you were here. Charlotte set the box on the bed, studying Elara with frank curiosity. He said you might need help getting ready for tonight. He told you about everything? He told me enough. Charlotte opened the box, revealing a gown that made Elara's breath catch. Deep midnight blue, almost black with silver embroidery that caught the light like stars. He also told me that you're incredibly brave, that you've survived things that would have broken most people, and that if I treat you with anything less than full respect, he'll make my life miserable. Despite everything, Elara almost smiled. He said that? More or less. Rowan's not great with emotional speeches, but the message was clear. Charlotte pulled out the dress, held it up. This was my mother's, from before she became, well, before she became what she is now. I thought you might like it. I can't wear Lady Ashford's gown to a ball she's hosting. She'll have an apoplexy. Good. Charlotte's grin was sharp. Maybe it'll distract her from destroying you long enough for you to make your statement. Besides, Rowan approved it. And what Rowan approves, Mother can't touch. He's the Duke now. She seems to forget that sometimes. Elara took the dress carefully, running her fingers over the fine fabric. It was beautiful. More beautiful than anything she'd worn in years. Why are you helping me? She asked quietly. Charlotte's expression sobered. Because I'm tired of watching my mother tear down every woman she thinks isn't good enough for this family. Because I remember you from before, and you were kind to me when most people didn't notice I existed. And because... She hesitated. Because Rowan hasn't cared about anything in years. Not really. He's been like a ghost, going through the motions. But last night, when he told me you were here, I saw something in his eyes I haven't seen since you left. Something alive. The words settled into Elara's chest, warm and terrifying. I'm not here to rekindle anything with your brother, she said, needing to make that clear. I'm here to clear my name, that's all. Sure. Charlotte didn't sound convinced. Well, whatever the reason, you're here. And tonight, we're going to make damn sure everyone knows you're not backing down. She gestured to the dress. Come on, let's get started. We have 6 hours to make you look like the kind of woman who could take down an empire. By the time the sun set, Elara barely recognized herself. The dress fit perfectly, hugging her figure before flowing out in a cascade of midnight silk. Charlotte had done something intricate with her hair, pinning it up in a way that emphasized the sharp angles of her face, no longer soft and young, but striking, severe, almost dangerous. Perfect, Charlotte said, stepping back to admire her work. You look like a queen going to war. I feel like I'm going to be sick. That's normal. The trick is not showing it. Charlotte squeezed her shoulder. Remember, you've already survived the worst thing that could happen to you. Nothing tonight can be worse than what you've already endured. What if they won't? Rowan won't let them. Charlotte's voice was firm. My brother is a lot of things. Cold, ruthless, impossible to please. But once he decides someone is under his protection, he doesn't break. Ever. He'll burn the whole manor down before he lets them hurt you. A knock at the door interrupted them. Rowan's voice came from the other side. It's time. Elara took one last look at herself in the mirror. A stranger looked back. Someone hard. Someone who'd survived. Someone who might, just might, be strong enough for what came next. She opened the door. Rowan stood there in full formal dress, all black except for the silver trim that matched her gown. He looked like a storm made flesh. Dangerous, powerful, untouchable. His eyes swept over her, and something flickered in their depths. You look ridiculous? She tried to joke. Formidable. He offered his arm. Ready? No, she wasn't ready, would never be ready. But she took his arm anyway, felt the solid strength of him beneath her hand, and let that be enough. They descended the stairs together. The ballroom was already full of people. Hundreds of them, it seemed, all dressed in their finest, all talking and laughing and living their easy, uncomplicated lives. The lives Elara had once thought she could have. The moment she stepped through the doorway on Rowan's arm, the talking stopped. Just stopped. Like someone had cut the strings of every voice at once. Hundreds of eyes turned toward her, hundreds of faces she recognized, faces from her old life, faces she'd seen in nightmares for 5 years. The silence stretched, terrible and complete. Then the whispers started. Is that... It can't be. Elara Vance. The murder. What is she doing here? On the Duke's arm. Rowan's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. A silent message. I'm here. Hold on. They walked forward into the crowd, and the people parted like water, pulling away as if afraid to get too close. As if she might contaminate them. Lady Ashford appeared at the edge of the dance floor, resplendent in emerald silk, her face a mask of perfect courtesy that didn't quite hide the fury in her eyes. Rowan, her voice cut through the whispers. I don't believe this woman was on the guest list. She's my guest, Rowan said calmly. Is there a problem, Mother? The guest list was finalized weeks ago, and I'm the Duke. If I want to bring a guest, I bring a guest. His voice didn't rise, didn't change inflection, but somehow it filled the room. Or do you mean to challenge me on that? Lady Ashford's smile went sharp as knives. Of course not, darling, though I must say your choice of companion is surprising, given the circumstances. What circumstances would those be? Well, surely you've heard the rumors about Mrs. Vance, about her late husband's tragic death. I've heard rumors, Rowan agreed. I've also learned not to believe everything printed in scandal sheets by people with agendas. But perhaps you have evidence I don't. The room had gone silent again, everyone straining to hear. Lady Ashford's eyes glittered. I only mean that perhaps Mrs. Vance would be more comfortable somewhere quieter, less public. For her own sake. I'm perfectly comfortable where I am, Lady Ashford. Elara's voice came out steady, thank God. But thank you for your concern. My dear, I'm only thinking of you. You must know how difficult this is for people. Having you here after everything... After my husband's death, you mean? Elara lifted her chin. Yes, I'm sure it's very difficult for people to face a widow at a ball. How inappropriate of me to still be alive. Someone in the crowd gasped. You didn't use that tone with Lady Ashford. You didn't challenge her, not in her own home, not in front of everyone. But Elara was done being careful. If you'll excuse us, Rowan said, cutting off whatever his mother had been about to say, I believe they're starting a waltz. Elara? He led her onto the dance floor, and after a moment's hesitation, the musicians started to play. Rowan's hand settled on her waist, and they began to move. That was dangerous, he murmured. I'm done being safe. I noticed. Was that approval in his voice? You've changed. People do, when they're forced to. They spun through the music, and slowly, other couples began to join them on the floor. Not many, most people still hung back, watching, judging, but enough that they weren't completely alone in their defiance. "Do you see him?" Rowan asked quietly. "Gerald's brother, Marcus Vance." Elara's eyes swept the crowd and found him. Standing near the refreshment table, watching her with barely concealed hatred, Marcus Vance, the man who dragged her back when she tried to escape, the man who'd told her she'd hang if she tried to leave again. "I see him. He's going to try something, tonight or soon. He won't let this stand." "Let him try." Elara's voice was hard. "I'm not afraid of him anymore." "You should be. He's dangerous." "So am I." She met Rowan's eyes. "You have no idea what I had to become to survive these last 5 years. What I had to do. Who I had to let die inside me so the rest could live. I'm not that girl you knew anymore, Rowan. That girl is gone." "Good," he said, and spun her harder. "That girl couldn't have done this. Couldn't have faced this crowd. Couldn't have survived." His hand tightened on her waist. "But the woman you've become, she's magnificent." The word hit her like a physical blow. Magnificent. When was the last time someone had looked at her and seen anything but shame? The waltz ended. Rowan escorted her off the floor, back toward the edge of the ballroom, and, "Mrs. Vance!" Marcus Vance stood in their path, blocking it. He was older than his brother had been, harder, with the kind of eyes that had never looked at anything with kindness. "Mr. Vance," Elara kept her voice neutral. "Quite a bold move, showing your face here." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I almost admire the audacity. Though I wonder if His Grace understands exactly what kind of woman he's chosen to associate with." "I understand perfectly," Rowan said, voice cold. "Do you? Do you know that this woman was accused by multiple servants of poisoning my brother? That there were witnesses to her violence?" "I know your brother was mad," Elara said before Rowan could respond. "I know he locked me in rooms and accused me of witchcraft and tried to strangle me 3 separate times. Should I go on? Or would you prefer to have this conversation somewhere more private?" Marcus's face went purple. "How dare you speak of him that way?" "I'll speak of him however I like. He's dead. He can't hurt me anymore. And neither can you." "Can I?" Marcus leaned closer, voice dropping to a hiss only they could hear. "You think standing next to a duke makes you safe? You think these people will ever accept you? You're poison, Mrs. Vance, and everyone knows it. It's only a matter of time before the Duke realizes it too. Is there a problem here?" Charlotte appeared at Elara's other side, her voice pleasant but her eyes sharp. "Mr. Vance, I believe my mother wanted to speak with you. Something about the hunting party next week?" It was a clear dismissal. Marcus hesitated, clearly wanting to say more, but even he couldn't make a scene in front of half of London society. "This isn't over," he said quietly, then turned and stalked away. Elara realized she was shaking. "Come on," Charlotte said gently. "Let's get you some air." They made it to the terrace before Elara's legs gave out. She grabbed the railing, gasping, trying to pull air into lungs that suddenly didn't want to work. "Easy," Rowan's voice, close and calm. "You're all right. Just breathe." "I can't. He's going to do nothing. I won't let him." Rowan's hands settled on her shoulders, grounding. "Look at me, Elara. Look at me." She forced her eyes up to his. "You did it," he said. "You walked in there. You faced them all. You didn't break. Do you understand how extraordinary that is? I feel like I'm falling apart." "You're not. You're just feeling everything you've been holding back for 5 years. Let it come. It's safe now." So she did. She let herself shake, let the fear and rage and grief pour through her while Rowan held her steady and Charlotte stood guard at the terrace door, making sure no one interrupted. When the storm finally passed, leaving her wrung out and exhausted, Elara pulled back, wiping at her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be." Rowan's voice was firm. "You're allowed to break sometimes, as long as you put yourself back together after. And if I can't, then I'll help you." He said it like a vow. "Whatever it takes, however long it takes. You're not alone anymore, Elara. Do you understand? You're not alone." And standing there on the terrace, with the sounds of the ball drifting out behind them and the night air cool on her skin, Elara let herself believe it. just for a moment. Just enough to find the strength to go back inside. They made it through 3 more dances before the real attack came. Elara was standing near the windows, accepting a glass of champagne from a server, when she heard the voice behind her. "I must say, you have remarkable courage, Mrs. Vance." She turned to find Lord Pemberton, one of the most influential men in Parliament, watching her with the kind of smile that made her skin crawl. "Thank you, Lord Pemberton." Or perhaps it's not courage at all. He took a sip of his own drink, eyes never leaving her face. Perhaps it's simply the arrogance of someone who's gotten away with murder. The conversations around them died. People turned to listen. "I beg your pardon?" Elara kept her voice level despite the way her heart had started hammering. "Oh, come now. We're all thinking it. Someone should have the honesty to say it aloud." Pemberton's smile widened. "Gerald Vance was my godson. Did you know that? I watched that boy grow up, watched him become a fine man, and then he married you, and within 2 years, he was dead. My husband's death was a tragedy." "Your husband's death was convenient." Pemberton cut her off. "Convenient for you, at least. No more marriage, no more obligations. Free to pursue other interests." His gaze flicked toward Rowan, who was across the room speaking with his steward. "How long have you been planning this reunion, I wonder? Did you write to the Duke while your husband was still alive? Make promises about what you'd do once you were free?" Elara felt the blood drain from her face. "That's a vile accusation. Is it? Or is it simply the truth no one else has the spine to speak?" Pemberton moved closer, and she smelled brandy on his breath. "You were nothing when Gerald married you. A ruined girl from a minor family. He gave you everything, his name, his protection, his home, and you repaid him by pushing him down the stairs. He fell, so you claim. But there were servants who heard you arguing, who heard you threaten him." "I never threatened him. He was ill. He was having delusions." "Convenient again, isn't it? Claim the victim was mad so no one believes his accusations." Pemberton's voice rose, carrying across the ballroom. "Well, I knew Gerald Vance. I knew him better than anyone, and he was not mad. He was desperate, desperate to escape a wife who was slowly poisoning him, who was driving him to ruin, who finally killed him when he threatened to expose her." The silence in the ballroom was absolute now. Everyone was watching, everyone was listening, and Elara realized, with a sick dropping sensation in her stomach, that this wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. Pemberton hadn't just decided to confront her on a whim. He'd been waiting for the right moment, the right audience. This was an execution. "Lord Pemberton." Rowan's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He was moving toward them now, cutting through the crowd with the kind of deadly purpose that made people scramble out of his way. "I believe you're drunk." "I'm sober as Sunday, Your Grace, and I'm saying what everyone else is too polite to say. This woman is a murderer, and you're a fool for bringing her here." Rowan stopped in front of Pemberton, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Interesting accusation. Do you have proof?" "I have testimony from multiple servants. Servants employed by Marcus Vance, servants who would say whatever they were paid to say." Rowan's voice was cold enough to freeze blood. "Is that the quality of evidence that satisfies you these days?" "I have medical records showing Gerald's declining health." "Declining mental health," Rowan corrected. "Records that show he was suffering from severe delusions, paranoia, violent episodes, all documented by his own physicians." Pemberton's face reddened. "Those records are sealed. Not to me." Rowan smiled, and it was terrifying. "Did you really think I'd bring Mrs. Vance here without doing my research? I've read every document related to Gerald Vance's death, every testimony, every medical report, and do you know what I found? A man who was deeply, tragically ill. A man whose family knew he was ill but chose to hide it rather than get him help. A man who died in an accident that could have been prevented if the people who claimed to love him had cared more about his well-being than their reputation. You're twisting the facts. I'm stating them, which is more than you're doing." Rowan moved closer to Pemberton, and despite being the same height, somehow he seemed to tower over the older man. "Let me be very clear. Mrs. Vance is under my protection. Anyone who makes accusations against her without proof will answer to me. Personally. Do you understand?" Pemberton's jaw worked. "You're making a mistake." "That's my prerogative." "Now." You have two choices. You can apologize to Mrs. Vance for your baseless slander, or you can leave my home immediately. You can't throw me out, can't I? This is my house, my ball, my rules. Rowan's eyes were glacial. What's it going to be? The entire ballroom waited. Elara could feel hundreds of eyes on her, on Pemberton, on Rowan. This was the moment that would determine whether she'd won or lost. Pemberton looked at her, and the hatred in his eyes was pure and bright. "This isn't over," he said quietly. Then, louder, addressing the room. "You're all fools if you believe her innocence. That woman is dangerous. Mark my words, before this season is out, someone else will pay the price for his Grace's misplaced loyalty." He turned and stalked toward the exit. Marcus Vance, Elara noticed, followed him, along with half a dozen other men. The ballroom slowly came back to life. Conversations resumed, though they were quieter now, more furtive. People were choosing sides. She could see it happening, clusters forming, glances being exchanged. Some people moved closer to her and Rowan, showing their support. Others drifted away, aligning themselves with Pemberton's faction. "Well," Charlotte appeared at Elara's elbow, "that went about as badly as it could have." "He planned it," Elara said, her voice hollow. "The whole thing. He waited until Rowan was far enough away that I'd be alone. Made sure there was an audience. He wanted to destroy me publicly." "He wanted to force Rowan to choose," Charlotte corrected, "between you and social stability, between protecting you and maintaining his political alliances." She glanced at her brother, who was now speaking in low tones with several of the men who'd stayed. "He chose you. That's going to cost him." "How much?" Charlotte's expression was grim. "Pemberton controls 30 seats in Parliament. He has connections to half the noble families in England, and he's ruthless. If he's decided you're an enemy, he won't stop until you're destroyed." She paused. "Or until he is." "Then we destroy him first," Rowan said, rejoining them. His face was composed, but Elara could see the tension in his shoulders. "We find evidence that Gerald was ill. We find the physicians who treated him. We get statements from anyone who witnessed his violent episodes. We build a case so airtight that even Pemberton can't argue with it." "That could take months," Charlotte said. "Then we have months. Elara isn't going anywhere." He looked at her. "Are you?" She should say yes. Should tell him this was too dangerous, too costly. Should take the out he was offering and disappear back into obscurity. But the look in Pemberton's eyes was still burned into her mind. That absolute certainty that he could destroy her. That she was nothing, no one, powerless. She'd spent 5 years being powerless. "No," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." The newspapers the next morning were brutal. "Duke's Dangerous Liaison," read the headline in the Morning Chronicle. "Murderous Widow Returns to Society Under Ashford Protection." The article beneath was worse. It detailed every rumor about Gerald's death, every whispered accusation. It quoted Pemberton extensively, painting Elara as a calculating seductress who'd trapped one man and was now working on another. It suggested that Rowan was being manipulated, that his judgment had been compromised by past entanglements. "They're digging into your history," Charlotte said, setting down the paper with a grimace. "Into your relationship with Rowan before you married Gerald. They're trying to make it look like this has been some kind of long conspiracy." Elara sat in the morning room, staring at the paper without really seeing it. She felt numb, hollowed out. "Let them dig," Rowan said. He was standing by the window, the same position he seemed to favor when he was thinking. "Everything they find will only prove what I already know, that you were pushed into marriage with Gerald, that you had no choice." "But they won't see it that way," Elara said quietly. "They'll twist it, make it look like I seduced you to advance myself, then married Gerald for his money, then came back to you when he was conveniently dead. So we get ahead of the narrative." Rowan turned to face her. "We tell the truth first before they can distort it." "Tell the truth to who?" "To everyone." He moved toward the desk, pulled out paper and pen. "We publish our own statement, lay out the facts, Gerald's illness, the testimony of the physicians, your attempts to get help that were blocked by his family. We make it impossible for them to pretend this was anything other than a tragedy." No newspaper will publish that, Charlotte said. Not against Pemberton. Not against the Vance family. Then we'll publish it ourselves. Hire presses. Distribute pamphlets. I have enough money to flood London with the truth if I need to. Elara struggled to find words. That's madness. You'd be starting a war. The war already started. Last night, when Pemberton made his accusations. Now we're just choosing whether to fight back or surrender. Rowan's eyes met hers. What do you want to do? What did she want? She wanted to be safe. She wanted to stop being afraid. She wanted to live without looking over her shoulder, without wondering when the next attack would come. But she'd learned something in 5 years of marriage to Gerald. Safety was an illusion. The only real protection was power, and the only way to get power was to take it. We fight, she said. They spent the next week building their case, and Elara discovered that Rowan hadn't been exaggerating about doing research. He had files, thick folders full of documents related to Gerald Vance, medical records obtained from physicians who, it turned out, were more than willing to talk once they were offered both money and protection. Testimony from servants who'd witnessed Gerald's violent episodes and been dismissed by the Vance family for trying to speak up. Even letters Gerald had written to his brother detailing his paranoid fantasies about Elara. How did you get all this? Elara asked, sorting through papers in Rowan's study. It was past midnight, and they'd been working for hours. Charlotte had long since gone to bed. I have people, Rowan said vaguely, investigators, researchers, people who are very good at finding things that are meant to stay hidden. You did all this in a week? I started 5 years ago. He didn't look up from the letter he was reading. When you disappeared, when I couldn't find you, I started investigating Gerald Vance, trying to understand why you'd married him. What I found, he paused, jaw tight. What I found was a family very skilled at covering up scandal, at making problems disappear, at destroying anyone who threatened their reputation. Elara felt something twist in her chest. You've been investigating him for 5 years? I told you, I never stopped looking for you. He finally met her eyes. I just didn't know where you were, but I knew who you were with, and I made it my business to know everything about him. Why? Because I couldn't let go. The words came out raw. Because even though I told myself you'd chosen him, chosen that life, I couldn't stop needing to know you were safe. And the more I learned about Gerald Vance, the more certain I became that you weren't. I wasn't, Elara said quietly. But I survived. You did more than survive. You became someone who could stand in a ballroom full of people who wanted you destroyed and not break. He stood, crossed to where she sat, and for a moment just looked at her. Do you know how extraordinary that is? I don't feel extraordinary. I feel tired. Then rest. His hand came up, brushed a strand of hair back from her face. The gesture was so gentle it made her want to cry. You don't have to do this all tonight. Yes, I do, because tomorrow Marcus Vance is calling for a formal inquiry into Gerald's death, and if we don't have our evidence ready, we'll have it ready, I promise. He took her hand, pulled her to her feet. But right now, you need to sleep. We both do. We're no good to anyone exhausted. He was right, but she didn't want to leave. Didn't want to step outside this room, this moment, where it was just the two of them against the world. Rowan, she said, and wasn't sure what she meant to say next. Thank you? I'm sorry? I never stopped loving you? I know, he said, as if he could hear all of it anyway. I know. The formal inquiry was announced 3 days later. Marcus Vance had petitioned the magistrate claiming new evidence had come to light regarding his brother's death. Evidence that proved, he said, that Gerald had been murdered and that Elara Vance was responsible. It's a trap, Charlotte said, reading the summons that had been delivered that morning. They're going to force you to testify, force you to answer questions in front of a magistrate. And if you refuse, it'll look like you're hiding something. What kind of evidence could they possibly have? Elara demanded. I didn't kill him. There is no evidence. Doesn't matter if it's real, Rowan said grimly. All that matters is that they can make it look real. A servant who claims to have seen you push him. A forged letter suggesting you'd planned it. Poison found in the house that they'll say was yours. He crumpled the summons in his fist. They'll manufacture whatever they need. So what do? We attend the inquiry. We present our evidence first. We show that Gerald was ill, that his death was accidental, that his family knew he was dangerous and did nothing. Rowan's voice was hard. And we make Marcus Vance admit, under oath, that he knew his brother was mentally unstable and chose to leave you alone with him anyway. That won't save her, Charlotte said quietly. Even if you prove Gerald was ill, even if you prove his family is lying, she'll still be ruined. No one will want to associate with someone involved in that kind of scandal. She'll be toxic. Then she'll be toxic with me. Rowan's eyes met Elara's. I'm not abandoning you. Not now. Not ever. The certainty in his voice made something break open inside her, something she'd kept locked down for 5 years. Why? The word came out broken. Why are you doing this? You could walk away, claim you were misled, save yourself. Why are you risking everything for me? Rowan crossed to her, took her face in his hands, and the look in his eyes was fierce enough to burn. Because I let you go once, he said. Because I was too young, too weak, too concerned with what people would think to fight for you. Because I spent 5 years in hell knowing you were out there somewhere, suffering, and I couldn't help you. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. I won't make that mistake again. I don't care what it costs. I don't care who I have to fight. You're mine to protect now, and I protect what's mine. I'm not yours. Aren't you? His voice dropped lower. Haven't you always been? Even when you were married to him, even when you hated me for not coming after you, weren't you still mine? She should deny it, should push him away, should protect herself from the inevitable moment when this all fell apart. But she was so tired of protecting herself. Yes, she whispered. He kissed her. It was nothing like the kisses they'd shared 5 years ago, when they were young and foolish and thought love was enough. This was desperate, raw, edged with 5 years of grief and rage and longing. His hands tangled in her hair and she grabbed his shirt and they clung to each other like drowning people. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Charlotte had disappeared, probably to give them privacy. We're going to win this, Rowan said against her mouth. I swear to you, we're going to destroy everyone who tried to hurt you. And if we don't? Then we'll run. I'll take you somewhere they can't reach us, somewhere you can be safe. I don't want to run anymore. Elara pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I want to fight. I want them to pay for what they did. Then that's what we'll do. He kissed her again, softer this time. Together. The inquiry was held in the magistrate's office, a cramped room that smelled of old paper and older money. The magistrate himself, Lord Thornbury, was ancient, partially deaf, and had a reputation for being easily swayed by whoever spoke loudest. Not promising. Marcus Vance arrived with Pemberton and 3 other men, all dressed in black like they were attending a funeral. In a way, Elara supposed they were. Her funeral. Mrs. Vance, Marcus said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, how good of you to attend. I was summoned. I had little choice. Of course. Well, let's not draw this out unnecessarily. Lord Thornbury, if we may begin? The magistrate nodded, gestured for everyone to sit. Marcus started by presenting his evidence. A servant, a girl named Mary, who'd worked in the Vance household, testified that she'd seen Elara and Gerald arguing the night he died, that she'd heard Elara threaten him. What exactly did you hear? The magistrate asked. Mary twisted her hands. She said she wished he was dead, that she'd be free if he'd just fall down the stairs and break his neck. Elara felt ice flood her veins. That was almost exactly what she'd said. But the context, that's taken out of context, she said, unable to stop herself. He was having an episode. He'd locked me in my room for 3 days. I was desperate. Please allow the witness to finish, Lord Thornbury said mildly. Mary continued, describing how Gerald had seemed afraid of Elara in his final weeks, how he'd told the servants to watch her, to make sure she didn't poison his food. It was damning. All of it was technically true, but stripped of context, it made her look like a monster. When Mary finished, Marcus presented a letter. This was found among my brother's effects. A letter he wrote to me 2 weeks before his death. The magistrate read it aloud. Gerald's handwriting, shaky and desperate, claiming Elara was trying to kill him, that he was afraid to sleep at night, that he needed help. "Why didn't you provide this to authorities at the time of your brother's death?" Lord Thornbury asked. "I didn't know it existed until recently. It was misfiled among his papers." Marcus's voice was smooth. "But now that we have it, along with Mary's testimony, I believe it's clear what happened. My brother was murdered by his wife, and she must answer for it." The room was silent. Elara could feel her pulse hammering in her throat. This was it. This was where it ended. Then Rowan stood. "I have evidence as well," he said. "Evidence that tells a very different story." He presented the medical records first. Detailed documentation from 3 separate physicians, all confirming Gerald Vance had been suffering from severe mental illness, paranoid delusions, violent episodes, suicidal ideation. "This is slander," Marcus protested. "My brother was not mad." "Your brother was ill," Rowan cut him off. "And you knew it. You knew it. And you did nothing. You left Mrs. Vance alone with a dangerous man rather than admit your family had a problem." He presented more documents. Letters from servants who'd quit because they were afraid of Gerald. Reports from neighbors who'd heard shouting, breaking glass, violence. And then, the final piece. A letter from Marcus himself to one of the physicians, asking how to have someone committed to an asylum without their consent. "This letter is dated 6 months before Gerald's death," Rowan said. "You were planning to have your own brother committed. You knew he was dangerous, and yet you did nothing to protect his wife." Marcus's face had gone white. I was trying to help. You were trying to hide your family's shame, and Mrs. Vance paid the price." Rowan turned to the magistrate. "Gerald Vance's death was a tragedy, but it was an accident caused by his own illness, not murder. And the people truly responsible are the ones who knew he needed help and refused to get it for him." The magistrate was silent for a long moment, studying the document spread before him. "This is highly irregular," he said finally. "What's irregular," Rowan said coldly, "is attempting to prosecute a woman for murder when there's no credible evidence of a crime. What's irregular is allowing a family to destroy someone's reputation to hide their own failures. What's irregular is this entire proceeding." Lord Thornbury looked at Marcus. "Do you have any response to His Grace's evidence?" Marcus opened his mouth, closed it. His face was a mask of barely controlled rage. "The Vance family has always been respected," he said finally. "We have always conducted ourselves with honor. To have our name dragged through the mud like this—" "Your name?" Elara stood, and her voice cut through the room like a whip. "Your name? Your brother locked me in rooms, accused me of witchcraft, tried to strangle me. And you knew. You knew, and you told me if I tried to leave, you'd have me committed. You threatened me. You held me prisoner. And now you have the audacity to talk about honor? You're a liar. I'm a survivor." She moved toward him, and he actually took a step back. "I survived your brother. I survived you. I survived 5 years of being called a murderer by people who couldn't be bothered to learn the truth. And I'm done being quiet about it." She turned to the magistrate. "Gerald Vance was ill. Tragically, terribly ill. And he died in an accident. That's the truth. Everything else is just people trying to protect their own reputations at my expense." Lord Thornbury looked between her and Marcus for a long moment. Then he gathered up the papers, tapped them into a neat stack, and stood. "Based on the evidence presented," he said slowly, "I find no basis for criminal charges against Mrs. Vance. This inquiry is concluded." The room exploded. Marcus was shouting something about justice, about corruption, about how Rowan must have bribed the magistrate. Pemberton was trying to appeal to Lord Thornbury, claiming the evidence was fabricated. But Rowan just took Elara's arm and guided her toward the door. They made it outside before her knees gave out. "I've got you," Rowan said, catching her. "You're all right. It's over." "It's not over." Elara was shaking. "You heard them. They're going to appeal. They're going to keep fighting until nothing. We won, Elara. The magistrate ruled in your favor. Legally, you're free. But socially, we just showed everyone that we have evidence and they have lies. Some people will still believe the lies, but enough people saw the truth today to make a difference." He tilted her face up to his. You won. Do you understand? You faced them down, and you won. Behind them, she could hear Marcus still shouting, still threatening, still refusing to accept defeat. And she realized Rowan was right. It didn't matter what Marcus said anymore. Didn't matter what rumors he spread. She had proof now, had testimony, had the law on her side. For the first time in 5 years, she was truly free. "What do we do now?" she asked. Rowan's smile was sharp and dangerous. Now we make sure everyone who tried to destroy you pays for it, starting with Marcus Vance. Making Marcus Vance pay turned out to be more complicated than either of them anticipated. 2 days after the inquiry, Rowan's solicitor arrived at the manor with news that made the blood drain from Elara's face. "Marcus Vance has filed suit," the solicitor said, spreading papers across Rowan's desk. "He's claiming defamation. Says the statements made during the inquiry damaged his reputation and his family's good name. He's seeking damages of £50,000. "That's absurd," Charlotte said from her position by the window. "We presented facts, medical evidence. How is that defamation?" "It doesn't matter if it's absurd." The solicitor, a thin man named Whitmore with nervous hands, shuffled through the papers. "What matters is that he's forcing you into court. A public trial, where every detail of Gerald Vance's illness, Mrs. Vance's marriage, and your relationship with her will be examined by lawyers and reported in every newspaper in England." Elara felt the walls closing in. "He's trying to destroy us through scandal, even though he lost the legal battle." "Precisely." Whitmore looked at Rowan. "Your Grace, I must advise that settling out of court would be—" "No." Rowan's voice was flat. "We're not paying him a single penny. We're going to trial." "But the publicity—" "Let there be publicity. Let everyone see exactly what kind of man Marcus Vance is. Let them see how far he'll go to protect his family's reputation at the expense of the truth." Whitmore looked like he wanted to argue more, but clearly thought better of it. "As you wish, Your Grace. But I should warn you, trials like this can take months, even years. And during that time, the rumors, the speculation—" He glanced at Elara. "It will be difficult." Difficult. What a pale word for what was coming. After Whitmore left, Elara found herself standing in the same spot in Rowan's study where she'd stood 2 weeks ago, when this had all begun. It felt like a lifetime. "I should leave," she said quietly. "What?" "I should leave London, go back to Scotland, remove myself from your life before this destroys you completely." "Absolutely not. Rowan, he's going to drag your name through every gutter in England. Your business relationships, your political connections, your family's reputation, all of it will be collateral damage because you chose to stand by me." "I don't care." "You should care." She turned to face him. "You have responsibilities, people who depend on you, estates to manage, tenants who need you, business partners who can all go to hell if they think I'm abandoning you to save face." He crossed to her, grabbed her shoulders. "Stop trying to sacrifice yourself. Stop trying to disappear. We're past that now." "Are we?" "Because it seems like every time I think we've won, something worse happens. The ball, the inquiry, now this lawsuit. When does it end?" "When we make it end." His grip tightened. "When we stop reacting and start attacking. When we go after them with everything we have instead of just defending ourselves." "What are you talking about?" Rowan's smile was cold. "Marcus Vance isn't the only one with secrets. Neither is Pemberton. I've had investigators looking into both of them since the ball. And what they've found—" He moved to his desk, pulled out another folder. "What they've found is very interesting." Elara moved closer, looked at the papers he was spreading out. Financial records, letters, testimony from servants and business associates. "Marcus Vance has been embezzling from his brother's estate," Rowan said. "Gerald left everything to you in his will. Did you know that?" She shook her head numbly. "Well, he did. The house, the money, all of it. But Marcus has been managing the estate since Gerald's death, claiming it was his right as executor. And during that time, he's been systematically draining the accounts, forging documents to transfer properties to his own name, paying himself exorbitant management fees that were never authorized. That's fraud. That's a felony." Rowan's eyes glittered. "If we take this to the authorities, Marcus Vance will be arrested, tried, probably convicted. He'll lose everything, his freedom, his reputation, his family's remaining wealth. Elara stared at the documents, her mind racing. And Pemberton? Pemberton's been taking bribes. Lots of them. From shipping companies, railway investors, anyone who wanted favorable legislation. I have records of payments, correspondence, even a few witnesses willing to testify. Rowan leaned against his desk. If this goes public, he'll be expelled from Parliament, possibly prosecuted for corruption. How did you get all this? I told you, I have people who are very good at finding things. He studied her face. The question is, what do we want to do with it? Elara's first instinct was to say, use it, destroy them, make them pay for everything they'd done. But something held her back. If we release this, she said slowly, it won't just destroy Marcus and Pemberton. It'll destroy their families, their wives, their children, people who had nothing to do with any of this. So maybe there's another way. A way that gets us what we want without, she struggled to find the words, without becoming like them, without using the same tactics they used against me. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. What are you suggesting? We give them a choice. Drop the lawsuit and disappear from public life, or we release the evidence and let the law handle it. That's blackmail. That's leverage. Elara met his eyes. We're not lying. We're not fabricating evidence. We're just giving them the option to walk away with some dignity and tact. Isn't that more than they gave me? Charlotte, who'd been silent during the whole exchange, spoke up. She's right. If you destroy them publicly, you'll look vindictive, like you're abusing your power to crush anyone who challenges you. But if you give them a way out, if they're the ones who choose to retreat, she smiled, then you look magnanimous, and they look weak. Rowan considered this, then nodded slowly. All right, we'll try it your way. But if Marcus refuses, if he pushes forward with the lawsuit, then we bury him, Elara said. No mercy, no second chances. The meeting with Marcus Vance was arranged for neutral ground, a private room at one of London's most exclusive clubs. Rowan brought the evidence folder. Elara insisted on coming with him, despite his protests. If we're going to threaten him, I want to see his face when we do it, she said. Marcus arrived with 2 lawyers, both of whom looked expensive and mean. He'd clearly expected this to be a negotiation about settlement terms. His expression when Rowan spread out the financial records was almost worth everything they'd been through. Almost. What is this? Marcus demanded, though the way his face had gone pale suggested he knew exactly what it was. Evidence of fraud, Rowan said calmly. Evidence that you've been stealing from your brother's estate. From Mrs. Vance, technically, since she's the legal heir. One of the lawyers leaned forward, scanning the documents. His expression went carefully neutral. The look of a man realizing his client was completely screwed. These are private financial records, Marcus said. You had no right. I had every right. Mrs. Vance is the estate's beneficiary. She's entitled to review all financial dealings related to her inheritance. Rowan leaned back in his chair. What we found was troubling. Systematic theft over the course of nearly 5 years. Forged signatures. Falsified transfer documents. If we take this to the authorities, you'll be arrested within a week. Marcus's hands clenched on the table. You're bluffing. Am I? Rowan pulled out another sheet of paper. This is a sworn statement from your own accountant. He's willing to testify that you ordered him to falsify records, that you threatened him when he objected, that you've been planning to drain the estate completely and flee to France before anyone noticed. The second lawyer was writing something on his pad, sliding it toward Marcus. Probably telling him to shut up and not say anything incriminating. Marcus ignored it. You think you can destroy me? You think I'll just let you? We're not here to destroy you, Elara cut in. Her voice was steady, cold. We're here to offer you a choice. What choice? Drop the lawsuit, issue a public statement saying you've reconsidered the circumstances of your brother's death and accept that it was a tragic accident, resign from all public positions, and disappear from London society. Marcus laughed, sharp and bitter. You're insane. I'm not doing any of that. Then we go to the authorities, Rowan said. We present this evidence. You're arrested, tried, and convicted. You lose everything, your freedom, your reputation. your family's remaining assets. Your children grow up knowing their father is a thief and a fraud. He paused. Or you make the smart choice. You walk away now with your freedom intact. You get to keep what you haven't stolen yet, and you never have to see either of us again. The room was silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Marcus looked at his lawyers. Both of them had the carefully blank expressions of men who knew their client had no good options. How do I know you won't release this information anyway? Marcus asked finally. You don't, Elara said. You have to trust that we're better people than you are. That we keep our word when you never did. Marcus's jaw worked. She could see him calculating, weighing his options. Pride versus survival, reputation versus freedom. If I agree to this, he said slowly, I want assurances. Written guarantees that you won't. No. Rowan's voice was hard. You don't get assurances. You don't get guarantees. You get our word, which is worth more than any contract you could sign. You drop the lawsuit, you disappear, and we keep these documents locked away. That's the deal. Take it or leave it. Marcus stared at him with pure hatred. You've destroyed me. No, you destroyed yourself when you chose to protect your family's reputation instead of your brother's wife. When you let Gerald hurt her because it was easier than admitting he was ill. When you tried to have me arrested rather than face the truth. Elara's voice didn't waver. I'm just making sure you can't hurt anyone else. For a moment, she thought he might flip the table, might attack them both. The rage in his eyes was that bright, that sharp. But he was also a coward, and cowards always chose self-preservation over pride. Fine, he spat. I'll drop the lawsuit. I'll issue your damn statement. But this isn't over. You understand? This will never be over. Yes, it is, Rowan said quietly. Because if you ever come near Mrs. Vance again, if you ever speak her name, if you even think about causing more trouble, these documents go to every newspaper in England. And I'll personally ensure you spend the rest of your life in prison. Marcus stood so abruptly, his chair fell over. His lawyers scrambled to gather their papers, clearly eager to be anywhere else. You'll regret this, Marcus said at the door. Both of you. After he was gone, Elara released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Do you think he'll keep his word? She asked. He'll keep it long enough to matter. After that, Rowan stood, moved to the window. After that, we'll deal with whatever comes. No. Marcus kept his word, at least initially. The lawsuit was withdrawn 2 days later. A week after that, a brief statement appeared in the Times announcing that Marcus Vance had reconsidered the circumstances surrounding his brother's death and accepted that it had been a tragic accident resulting from Gerald's unfortunate mental condition. He expressed regret for any distress his previous statements had caused Mrs. Vance. The statement was cold, clearly coerced, and everyone knew it, but it was public, it was in print, and it was enough to shift the narrative. The newspapers, always hungry for fresh scandal, moved on to other topics. The whispers about Elara began to fade. Not completely, there would always be people who believed she'd gotten away with murder, but enough that she could walk through London without feeling like prey. She should have felt relieved, should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt restless. Something's wrong, she told Charlotte one afternoon. They were in the garden, ostensibly taking tea, though Elara couldn't focus on anything. What do you mean? I don't know. It's too easy. Marcus gave up too fast. Pemberton's been completely silent. After everything, after all that fighting, they just stopped. Maybe they finally realized they couldn't win. Or maybe they're planning something worse. Elara set down her teacup. Marcus said it wasn't over. What if he meant it? You're being paranoid. Am I? Elara turned to face her. These men don't give up. They don't surrender. They're not built that way. So why would they suddenly... The scream came from inside the house. Both women were on their feet instantly, running toward the sound. They found one of the housemaids in the entrance hall, sobbing, pointing at something on the floor. A letter, sealed with black wax. Charlotte picked it up, broke the seal, read it. Her face went white. What is it? Elara demanded. Charlotte handed her the letter without speaking. The words swam before Elara's eyes, rearranging themselves into something terrible. The Duke's mother, Lady Margaret Ashford, was found dead this morning in her townhouse in Mayfair. Initial reports suggest suicide by poison. The authorities have been notified. An investigation is underway. Elara's hands started shaking. No, no, this isn't. Where's Rowan? He went to meet with his steward. He should be back. The front door crashed open. Rowan stood there, and the look on his face told Elara he'd already heard. Is it true? She asked. He nodded once, sharp and jerky. Rowan, I'm so sorry. They're saying you did it. His voice was hollow. The authorities, they're saying you killed her. The world tilted. What? There's evidence. A bottle of poison found in her rooms traced back to an apothecary in Scotland, the same town where you've been living for the past 5 years. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were destroyed. They're saying you bought it months ago, that you came to London with a plan, that you wanted revenge on my mother for what she did to you 5 years ago. That's insane. I didn't. I know. He crossed to her, gripped her arms. I know you didn't, but they have evidence, Elara. Testimony from the apothecary, a purchase record with your signature, letters supposedly from you to my mother, threatening her. Those are forgeries. They have to be. Of course they are. But they look real, and the magistrate... He stopped, swallowed hard. They've issued a warrant for your arrest. You're to be held pending trial for murder. Elara felt the floor drop out from under her. Marcus. This is Marcus. He planned this. He knew we'd back him into a corner, so he killed my mother to frame you for it. Rowan's voice broke on the last word. He killed my mother. Charlotte made a sound like a wounded animal. How long do we have? Minutes, maybe. The constables are probably already on their way. Rowan was moving now, pulling Elara toward his study. You need to run. Now. I have a carriage ready, money, papers. I'm not running. Elara, if they arrest you, if this goes to trial, you'll hang. Do you understand? The evidence is too good, too complete. Even with the truth on our side, we won't be able to prove it in time. So I run, and I spend the rest of my life hiding, looking over my shoulder, letting them win. She pulled away from him. No, I'm done running. We fight this. We prove Marcus did it. How? He's been planning this for weeks, maybe months. He'll have alibis, witnesses, everything he needs to stay clear while you... Rowan's voice cracked. While you hang for a crime you didn't commit. Pounding on the door, shouting. The constables had arrived. Your Grace, open up! We have a warrant. Charlotte grabbed Elara's arm. There's a servant's passage. You can get out through the back. No. Elara's voice was steady, even though everything inside her was screaming. If I run, I'm admitting guilt. Every person who ever called me a murderer will be proven right. She looked at Rowan. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? With my life. Then let them arrest me. Let them think they've won. And while they're busy celebrating, you find proof that Marcus did this. Find out how he did it. Find witnesses. Find evidence. Find anything that will prove he killed your mother to get to me. Elara, I survived 5 years with Gerald. I can survive a few weeks in custody. She cupped his face in her hands. But I need you out here. I need you free to fight for me. Can you do that? The pounding was getting louder, more insistent. Rowan closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, the grief was gone, replaced by something cold and deadly. I'll destroy him, he said quietly. I'll tear apart everything he's built, everyone he loves, everything he's ever cared about. And when I'm done, he'll wish he'd never been born. Your Grace, we're coming in! The door burst open. 4 constables flooded into the study, hands on their weapons. Elara Vance, the lead constable said, you're under arrest for the murder of Lady Margaret Ashford. They pulled her arms behind her back. Cold metal bit into her wrists. Chains. They were actually putting her in chains. Don't hurt her. Rowan's voice was dangerous. If you so much as bruise her. Your Grace, please step aside. This is a legal arrest. I know what it is. Rowan moved closer to Elara, close enough that only she could hear him. I will come for you. Do you understand? I will tear down heaven and hell if I have to, but I will get you out of this. I know, she said. They dragged her toward the door. The last thing she saw before they pulled her outside was Rowan's face, grief and rage and determination all mixed together. And Charlotte, standing beside him, already pulling out paper and pen. already planning. But Newgate Prison was everything Elara had nightmares about, and worse. The cell was 8 feet by 6 feet, with stone walls weeping moisture and a straw mattress that smelled like death. There was a bucket in the corner for waste. A single barred window let in light, but no warmth. They'd stripped her of everything, her dress, her jewelry, even the pins in her hair. Given her rough wool clothes that scratched her skin, locked her in, and left her. The first night she didn't sleep, just sat against the wall, arms wrapped around her knees, and tried not to think about hanging, about the rope, about the drop. The second day they brought her before a judge for a preliminary hearing. More formal charges. More evidence presented, the poison bottle with her supposed purchase record, letters she'd never written, testimony from people she'd never met. Her solicitor, Whitmore, doing his best, tried to object, tried to argue the evidence was circumstantial. But even Elara could see it was hopeless. The case against her was airtight, almost perfect, which meant someone very smart had built it, someone who'd thought of everything. On the third day, Rowan came to visit. They met in a small room with a guard watching from the corner. Rowan looked like he hadn't slept in days. There were shadows under his eyes, and his clothes were wrinkled. "Tell me you found something," Elara said. "I found a lot of things, none of them helpful." He pulled out papers, spread them on the table between them. "Marcus has an alibi. He was at a dinner party the night my mother died. 20 witnesses. So he hired someone." "Probably, but I can't prove it. I've questioned every servant in his household, every business associate, every—" He stopped, ran his hands through his hair. "I'm missing something. There's a connection I'm not seeing." Elara studied the papers, purchase records, testimony, timelines, everything Marcus would need to frame her perfectly. And then she saw it. "The apothecary," she said slowly. "The one in Scotland who supposedly sold me the poison. What's his name?" "William Crane. Why? I know that name." Her mind was racing. "Gerald had a cousin, someone who visited us once, right after we were married. He was an apothecary. I don't remember his name, but you think it's the same man?" "I think Marcus has been planning this for years, since Gerald died. Maybe even before." She looked up at Rowan. "Find out everything about William Crane, his family connections, his finances, who he owes money to. If he's Gerald's cousin, if he has ties to the Vance family, then he's the weak link." Understanding dawned in Rowan's eyes. "If we can prove he forged the purchase records, if we can prove Marcus paid him, then the whole case falls apart." Rowan was already standing, gathering the papers. "I'll send investigators tonight. If there's a connection, we'll find it." "Rowan." She caught his hand before he could leave. "Your mother. I'm sorry. I know I keep saying it, but don't." His voice went rough. "Don't apologize for something you didn't do, and don't carry guilt that belongs to Marcus Vance." He squeezed her hand. "My mother and I, we weren't close. Not for years. Not since she tried to control every aspect of my life. But she didn't deserve this, and Marcus is going to pay for it." After he left, Elara sat alone in her cell and let herself feel it. The rage, the fear, the absolute injustice of everything. Let it burn through her until she was hollow. Then she started planning. 4 days later, Whitmore returned with news. "We found the connection," he said, barely able to contain his excitement. "William Crane is Gerald Vance's second cousin. Marcus has been paying him for years, small amounts, nothing suspicious. But 3 months ago, there was a large payment, £10,000. "Right when I came back to London," Elara said. "Precisely. And we found something else. Letters between Crane and Marcus, discussing the plan, discussing how to forge the purchase records, how to make it look convincing." "Where did you find these letters?" "Crane's wife turned them over. Apparently he's been drinking heavily, feeling guilty. She found the letters and realized what he'd done." Whitmore set the papers on the table. "This is it, Mrs. Vance. This proves Marcus orchestrated everything." Elara felt something release in her chest, relief so sharp it hurt. When can we present this to the judge? That's the problem. Whitmore's expression darkened. Marcus found out we were investigating Crane. Last night, Crane disappeared. Left his home, his shop, everything. Just vanished. Marcus got to him. Almost certainly. And without Crane's testimony, without him there to verify the letters, they're just pieces of paper. Any lawyer could argue they're forgeries, that we manufactured them to save you. The relief curdled into something bitter. So we're back where we started. Not quite. We have enough now to create reasonable doubt, enough to maybe avoid conviction, but Whitmore hesitated. A trial could go either way, and if you're convicted, hanging, he didn't have to say it. How long until trial? Elara asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3 if we request delays. 3 weeks. 3 weeks to find more evidence, to locate Crane, to somehow prove Marcus's guilt beyond the shadow of a doubt. 3 weeks to save her own life. After Whitmore left, Elara lay on her straw mattress and stared at the ceiling. The stone was dark with age and moisture, cracks running through it like veins. She'd been so sure they could prove the truth. So certain that justice would prevail because they had evidence, because they had the law on their side. But the law was just another tool, and people like Marcus Vance knew how to use tools better than anyone. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made her sit up. Not the regular guard rotation. These were heavier, faster. Her cell door crashed open. 4 men flooded in. Not constables, not guards. They wore rough clothes, faces covered with scarves. Elara scrambled backward, but there was nowhere to go in the tiny cell. "What do you want?" The largest man grabbed her arm, yanked her upright. "Marcus Vance sends his regards." Terror flooded through her. "If you kill me here, it'll be obvious." "Who said anything about killing?" The man's grip tightened. "Just making sure you understand your situation. Make sure you know what happens to people who threaten the Vance family." He nodded to one of the others. The second man moved forward, and Elara saw the knife. She tried to fight, tried to scream, but they'd known she would. They'd planned for it. One of them clamped a hand over her mouth while the others held her still. The knife came down. Not to kill. To mark. The blade cut across her left cheek, not deep but deliberate. Drawing blood. Drawing a line that would scar. "There," the leader said, stepping back. "Now everyone will know what you are. A murderer. Marked by her own guilt." They left as quickly as they'd come, and Elara collapsed against the wall, hand pressed to her bleeding face. The guard who finally came running looked at the blood, at her, and his expression said everything. "You deserve this. You're a criminal. This is justice." She didn't cry, didn't give them the satisfaction, but lying on her mattress afterward, feeling the blood dry on her face, feeling the throb of the cut that would definitely scar, she finally understood. This wasn't about justice. It wasn't about truth. It was about power. And Marcus Vance had just shown her exactly how much power he still wielded. Even from outside these walls, even with evidence against him, he could reach her, could hurt her, could do whatever he wanted. And unless Rowan found something, anything, to definitively prove Marcus's guilt, she was going to hang for a murder she didn't commit. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying. The prison doctor stitched her face without anesthetic. "Can't waste good laudanum on prisoners," he muttered, threading the needle through her skin like she was a piece of torn fabric. Especially ones accused of killing nobility. Elara bit down on the leather strap they'd given her and didn't make a sound. She'd learned that lesson with Gerald. Never let them see you break. Never give them the satisfaction. When Rowan arrived an hour later and saw the stitches, the bandage, the bruising around her eye where one of Marcus's men had hit her, something in his face went dead. "Who did this?" 4 men, faces covered. They said Marcus sent them. Her voice came out steady despite the pain radiating through her skull. "They wanted to make sure I understood my place." Rowan's hands curled into fists. "The guards let them in." The guards were probably paid to look the other way. Elara touched the bandage carefully. "How bad is it?" "You'll have a scar, a visible one." He said it like he was pronouncing a death sentence. "Good." He looked at her sharply. "Good?" "Let them see what Marcus Vance is willing to do. Let them see the kind of man who orders attacks on women in prison cells." She met his eyes. We can use this. We can make people see exactly who they're protecting. Or it'll make you look more dangerous, more guilty, like you're a threat that needed to be contained. Maybe. Probably. But sitting in this cell, wearing these rags, bleeding from a wound that would mark her forever, Elara found she didn't care anymore what people thought. "Did you find anything else?" she asked. "Any trace of Crane?" Rowan's expression went grim. Crane's body was found this morning, in the Thames, weighted down with stones. The authorities are calling it suicide. The air left Elara's lungs. Marcus killed him. Marcus had him killed. Eliminated the one person who could definitively prove the poison records were forged. Rowan slammed his fist against the wall. We had him. We had proof. And now we have a body. Another murder Marcus committed to cover his tracks. Elara's mind was racing despite the pain. Can we prove he did it? Crane disappeared the same night my investigators spoke to his wife. The next morning he's found dead. The timing alone is damning, but timing isn't proof. Elara closed her eyes. We need something concrete, something that ties Marcus directly to Crane's death. I know, I'm working on it. I have people watching Marcus's every move, tracking everyone he meets with, following the money. Rowan stopped, looked at her. But that takes time, and your trial starts in 12 days. 12 days to prove a man guilty of 2 murders when he'd been smart enough to leave no direct evidence. 12 days to save her own life. There's something else, Rowan said quietly. Pemberton has been silent. Too silent. I expected him to be crowing about your arrest, using it as proof he was right all along, but instead he's disappeared from public view. Won't take meetings, won't make statements, nothing. Maybe Marcus bought his silence too. Or maybe he's afraid. Maybe he knows something that makes him vulnerable if this goes to trial. Rowan moved closer, lowered his voice even though the guard was supposed to be out of earshot. Charlotte's been digging into Pemberton's connection to the Vance family. Turns out they've been business partners for years. Shipping investments, railway bonds, property speculation. They're financially entangled in dozens of deals. Understanding clicked into place. So if Marcus goes down, Pemberton goes down with him. Exactly. Which means Pemberton has every reason to want this trial to go a specific way, to want you convicted quickly and quietly so no one keeps digging. Rowan's eyes were hard, but it also means he might have information we can use. If we can pressure him, threaten to expose his own corruption, he might turn on Marcus to save himself. Elara felt a spark of hope, dangerous and bright. But how do we pressure him from in here? You don't. I do. Rowan took her hands. But I need to know you can hold on. 12 more days in this place. Can you do that? She looked around the cell. The stained walls, the bucket in the corner, the straw mattress already soaked with her blood. Thought about the men who'd attacked her, who would probably come back if they thought they could get away with it. Thought about the rope waiting at the end of this if they failed. I don't have a choice, she said. So yes, I can hold on. What? The next week was the longest of Elara's life. She existed in a state of constant vigilance, sleeping in shifts, always aware of footsteps in the corridor, of locks turning, of voices that might signal another attack. The guards treated her with barely concealed contempt. Other prisoners, the ones in neighboring cells, shouted abuse through the walls at night. Murderer, poisoner, whore. She let the words wash over her, conserved her strength, waited. Rowan visited every day, bringing news of his investigations, bringing food that wasn't the prison slop, bringing proof that someone still believed she was human. Pemberton's cracking, he reported on the 8th day. I've been having certain documents delivered to his house, reminders of his financial crimes, reminders that if this trial gets ugly, if investigators start digging deeper, he'll be exposed along with Marcus. Has he responded? Not yet, but he's scared. I can see it. Rowan leaned forward. There's something else. One of Marcus's servants came forward, a kitchen maid who was dismissed 2 months ago. She says she overheard Marcus and Crane arguing in the study. Crane was backing out, saying he couldn't go through with poisoning my mother. Marcus threatened him. Threatened his family. Elara's heart started pounding. That's hearsay. Would a court accept it? Depends on the judge. Depends on how much other evidence we have to support it. Rowan pulled out more papers. But combined with the letters, the financial records, the timing of Crane's death, it's building a picture, a pattern. Is it enough? I don't know, but it's what we have. On the 10th day, something shifted. Elara was in her cell when she heard shouting from outside. Not the usual prison noise. This was different, urgent, multiple voices. The guard unlocked her door, looking rattled. You have another visitor, irregular, but... He jerked his head. Come on. She followed him to the visitor's room, expecting Rowan. It was Pemberton. The old lord looked like he'd aged a decade in 2 weeks. His face was gray, his hands shaking slightly as he sat down across from her. Mrs. Vance, he said hoarsely. Lord Pemberton. She kept her voice neutral despite the shock. I wasn't expecting you. No, I imagine not. He couldn't seem to look at her directly, kept his eyes fixed on the table between them. I've come to offer testimony at your trial. The room seemed to tilt. Testimony? About Gerald Vance, about his illness, about... Pemberton swallowed hard. About Marcus's role in covering it up, in perpetuating the lies about your guilt. Elara stared at him. Why would you do that? You've spent weeks calling me a murderer. Because I was wrong. The words seemed dragged out of him. Because Marcus has gone too far, killing that apothecary, arranging your attack in prison, now planning... He stopped, shook his head. He's going to kill again, to cover his tracks. And I won't be party to more murder. Who's he planning to kill? Pemberton finally looked at her, and the fear in his eyes was real. Me. If I testify against him, he'll kill me next. But if I don't, if I let an innocent woman hang to protect a murderer, I'll never sleep again. You're choosing your conscience over your life. I'm choosing what's left of my soul over my comfort. He pulled out papers, pushed them across the table. This is my written testimony. Everything I know about Marcus's business dealings with Gerald, about the family's history of covering up scandals, about conversations I overheard, transactions I witnessed. His voice dropped. About Marcus telling me years ago that he'd do anything to protect the Vance name. Anything. Elara took the papers with trembling hands, scanned them. They were detailed, specific, damning. Not proof of murder, maybe, but proof of pattern. Proof that Marcus Vance was willing to sacrifice anyone who threatened his family's reputation. Why now? She asked. What changed? His Grace visited me, showed me evidence of my own crimes, offered me a choice, help prove your innocence or face prosecution for corruption. Pemberton's laugh was bitter. But it wasn't really the threat that convinced me. It was the realization that I've spent 30 years in politics, building power, accumulating influence, and for what? To protect men like Marcus Vance? To help powerful families destroy innocent people? What was the point of any of it? You could have made this choice years ago, when Gerald was still alive, when I was trapped in that house, afraid for my life. I know. He met her eyes finally, and I'll live with that failure until I die. But at least this time I can choose differently. At least this time I can do the right thing. After he left, Elara sat alone in the visitor's room, holding the testimony, and felt the first real hope she'd had since this nightmare began. It might not be enough to convict Marcus, but it was enough to create reasonable doubt, enough to show a pattern of lies and cover-ups, enough, maybe, to save her life. Set. The trial started on a gray Monday morning with rain hammering against the courthouse windows. They brought Elara from Newgate in chains, paraded her through crowds of people who'd come to watch the spectacle. Some threw things, rotten fruit, stones, worse. She kept her eyes forward, head high, and ignored the way the cut on her face pulled against the stitches. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, people standing in the back, pressing against walls. This was entertainment for them. A scandal to gossip about at parties. Marcus Vance sat in the gallery, surrounded by his lawyers, looking confident, smug. He caught her eye and smiled. She smiled back, cold and sharp, and watched his expression flicker. The prosecutor presented his case with theatrical flair. The poison bottle with her supposed signature. The purchase records from Crane's shop. The letters she'd allegedly written threatening Lady Ashford. Testimony from servants who claimed she'd visited the townhouse the night before the death. All of it lies. All of it manufactured. But presented together, with the prosecutor's dramatic delivery, it looked damning. Whitmore did his best during cross-examination, but the evidence was too clean, too complete. Every question he asked had an answer. Every angle he pursued led nowhere. By the end of the first day, even Elara could see the jury was convinced. She was guilty. The verdict was already decided in their minds. The second day started with the defense's case. Whitmore called Pemberton to the stand. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Pemberton was known, respected, powerful. His testimony would carry weight. Marcus's face went white. Pemberton took the oath with shaking hands, then proceeded to dismantle Marcus's entire story. He testified about the Vance family's history of covering up scandals, about Gerald's documented mental illness that the family had hidden, about conversations he'd had with Marcus about solving problems through any means necessary. "Did Mr. Marcus Vance ever discuss his brother's wife with you?" Whitmore asked. "Yes. Multiple times. He said she was a threat to the family reputation, that she knew too much about Gerald's condition, that she needed to be—" Pemberton paused, swallowed. Neutralized. Neutralized. Can you explain what he meant by that? "At the time, I thought he meant paid off, sent away. But after Lady Ashford's death, after Mrs. Vance was arrested on such perfectly constructed evidence, I realized he meant something far more permanent." The prosecutor objected strenuously. The judge allowed it to stand, noting that it was relevant to establishing pattern of behavior. Whitmore pressed further. "Did you ever witness any interactions between Marcus Vance and the apothecary William Crane?" "Yes. Crane came to Marcus's house several times over the past 6 months. Marcus always met with him privately, but I saw them once in the garden, and Marcus was—" Pemberton's voice shook, threatening him, saying if Crane didn't finish the job, his family would pay the price. "What job?" "I didn't know at the time, but now knowing that Crane supposedly sold poison to Mrs. Vance, knowing that Crane is now dead, I believe Marcus was forcing him to create false evidence, to frame an innocent woman for murder." The courtroom exploded. The judge hammered his gavel for order. Marcus was on his feet, shouting that Pemberton was lying, that he'd been coerced, that— "Mr. Vance," the judge said coldly, "sit down or be removed from this courtroom." Marcus sat, but his face was purple with rage. The third day brought more witnesses. Servants who'd worked for Gerald, who testified about his violent episodes. Physicians who'd treated him for mental illness. People who corroborated the picture Pemberton had painted, of a family desperate to hide scandal at any cost. And then Rowan took the stand. He testified about the evidence he'd gathered, about the investigation into Gerald's death, about the letters between Marcus and Crane that proved they'd been planning something together, about the financial records showing large payments from Marcus to Crane right before Lady Ashford's death. "Your Grace," the prosecutor said during cross-examination, "isn't it true that you have a personal relationship with the accused? That you've been romantically involved with her?" "We had a relationship years ago, before she married Gerald Vance." "And isn't it true that you've been providing her shelter since her husband's death? That you brought her to London, introduced her to society, defended her against accusations?" "Yes." "So you have every reason to want her proven innocent, every reason to manufacture evidence, to pressure witnesses, to do whatever it takes to save her." Rowan's eyes went cold. "I have every reason to want the truth revealed, which is why I've spent the last month investigating not just Gerald's death, but my own mother's murder. Because unlike some people in this courtroom, I care more about justice than reputation." He looked directly at Marcus when he said it. The fourth day, Elara finally took the stand. She'd been dreading this moment, having to stand up there, exposed, while the prosecutor tried to tear apart her story, while everyone stared at the scar on her face and judged her. But when her turn came, when she placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, something inside her steadied. She told them everything. About her marriage to Gerald, about his illness, his violence, his paranoid delusions, about Marcus knowing and doing nothing, about being trapped, threatened, left to survive however she could. About running the night Gerald died, not because she'd killed him, but because she knew no one would believe her innocence. About coming back to London not for revenge, but for freedom. For the chance to finally clear her name and live without fear. "And Lady Ashford?" the prosecutor asked. "You had reason to hate her, didn't you? She was the one who forced you into that marriage." "I had reason to resent her, to be angry with her, but I didn't hate her enough to kill her." Elara looked at the jury. "I know what it's like to be blamed for a death I didn't cause. To have everyone assume I'm guilty because the story is neat, because it fits what people want to believe. But wanting something to be true doesn't make it true. Yet you can't prove you didn't do it. Can you prove you didn't commit any unsolved murder in London? Can anyone here prove absolute innocence of a crime they're not charged with?" She leaned forward. "I can't prove I didn't kill Lady Ashford, but the prosecution can't prove I did either. Not really. All they have is manufactured evidence from a dead man who is being blackmailed by Marcus Vance. All they have is a story that's too perfect, too complete, built by someone who's done this before." During cross-examination, the prosecutor tried to shake her, tried to get her to admit she'd wanted revenge, that she'd planned this for years, that her relationship with Rowan was all part of some elaborate scheme. She answered every question calmly, steadily, refusing to be rattled. When she stepped down, she caught Rowan's eye. He nodded once. "Well done." The final day was closing arguments. The prosecutor painted her as a calculating killer who'd murdered one husband, framed herself as a victim, then murdered again when the opportunity arose. He called her dangerous, manipulative, a threat to society. Whitmore's closing was quieter but no less powerful. He laid out the timeline of Marcus's actions. The payments to Crane, the threats, the convenient disappearances and deaths of anyone who could expose the truth. He reminded the jury that the only real evidence against Elara came from a source controlled by Marcus Vance. "You're being asked to condemn a woman to death based on the word of a man who has every reason to lie," Whitmore said. "Based on manufactured proof created by someone who's shown, repeatedly, that he'll do anything to protect his family name. Even murder." He paused. Let that sink in. "Mrs. Vance isn't on trial here. Not really. What's on trial is whether we, as a society, will let powerful men destroy innocent lives to save their own reputations. Whether we'll look at the facts, really look at them, or whether we'll take the easy path and believe what we're told to believe." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Elara sat in the holding cell beneath the courtroom, listening to the rain, trying not to think about the rope, trying not to imagine the moment when they'd read the verdict and her life would end. Rowan wasn't allowed in the holding area, but Charlotte came, sat with her in silence, holding her hand. "Whatever happens," Charlotte said quietly, "you fought. You didn't let them make you small. You didn't disappear. If I hang, that's not much consolation." "Maybe not, but it's something. It's more than most people manage." When they finally called her back to the courtroom, Elara's legs almost didn't work. She had to force herself to walk, to climb the stairs, to take her place at the defendant's table. The jury filed in. She tried to read their faces, but they were carefully neutral. The foreman stood, cleared his throat. "In the matter of the death of Lady Margaret Ashford, we the jury find the defendant Elara Vance." The world narrowed to that single voice. "Not guilty." The courtroom exploded. Half the gallery was shouting in outrage, the other half in celebration. The judge hammered his gavel uselessly, trying to restore order. Elara couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Not guilty. She was free. Rowan was there suddenly, pulling her up, holding her while she shook. "It's over. You're free. You're Marcus Vance." The judge's voice cut through the chaos. "Mr. Vance, based on testimony provided during this trial, I'm issuing a warrant for your arrest on suspicion of murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Constables, take him into custody." Marcus tried to run, made it halfway to the door before the constables grabbed him. He was screaming, fighting, insisting this was all a mistake, that he'd been framed. Exactly what Elara had said for weeks. The irony wasn't lost on her. They dragged him out still shouting threats, still insisting on his innocence. And Elara, standing in the courtroom where she'd expected to be condemned, felt the last chains fall away. Not guilty. Free. Vindicated. She'd won. The celebration afterward was chaotic. Whitmore was grinning, shaking hands with everyone. Charlotte was crying. Rowan was fielding questions from reporters, from supporters, from people who suddenly wanted to be on the winning side. Elara stood apart from it all, still trying to process, still waiting for someone to tell her it was a mistake, that they'd miscounted the votes, that Mrs. Vance? Pemberton approached, looking older than ever. I wanted to tell you. I'm glad. I'm glad the jury saw the truth. You made that possible. Your testimony turned everything around. It was the least I could do, though. He glanced toward where Marcus had been dragged away. I suspect my life is about to become very complicated. Marcus has powerful friends, and I've just betrayed one of the most influential families in England. Then maybe you should leave London for a while. Maybe I should. He managed a weak smile. Or maybe I should stay and face the consequences of my actions for once. Novel concept, I know. After he left, Rowan finally extracted himself from the crowd and came to her. Let's get you out of here, he said. They slipped out a side entrance, avoiding the worst of the crowd, and made it to Rowan's carriage. Once inside, with the door closed and the noise muted, Elara finally let herself feel it. I didn't kill her, she said, and her voice broke. Your mother, I swear I didn't. I know. Rowan pulled her against him. I've always known. I'm sorry anyway. Sorry you lost her. Sorry this whole thing. Stop. He tilted her face up to his. Stop apologizing for things Marcus Vance did. Stop carrying his guilt. His thumb brushed carefully over her scarred cheek. You survived, Elara. You survived everything they threw at you, and you came out the other side. That's extraordinary. I don't feel extraordinary. I feel exhausted. Then rest. You've earned it. He kissed her forehead, gentle and careful. We both have. The carriage rolled through London streets, carrying them away from the courthouse, away from the crowds, away from the nightmare that had consumed the last month. But even as relief flooded through her, even as Elara let herself lean against Rowan and feel safe for the first time in weeks, she knew it wasn't completely over. Marcus had been arrested, but not convicted. There would be another trial, more testimony, more fighting, and Marcus had friends, allies, people who would do anything to protect him. The war wasn't finished, but for the first time since this all began, Elara was winning. And that was enough. For now, it was enough. But winning wasn't the same as being free. Elara discovered that truth 3 days after the verdict, when she tried to leave Ashford Manor for the first time since the trial. The crowd outside the gates was massive. Reporters, curiosity seekers, people who wanted to catch a glimpse of the woman who'd beaten a murder charge. Some were supportive, holding signs that read, "Justice for Elara," and "Truth prevails." Others were hostile, shouting about how she'd gotten away with murder, how the system was corrupt, how the Duke had bought her freedom. We can use the back entrance, Rowan said, watching the crowd from the study window. No. Elara straightened her shoulders. I'm done hiding. I'm done letting them control where I go and how I live. Elara, I walked into that ballroom when everyone wanted me destroyed. I sat through that trial knowing I might hang. I'm not going to hide now because a crowd wants to stare at me. She moved toward the door. I'm going to the market, like a normal person, and they can deal with it. Charlotte intercepted her in the hall. At least take some guards, please. Not everyone out there wishes you well. So Elara compromised. She took 2 guards, both men Rowan trusted completely, and she walked out the front entrance, head high, scar visible, and met the crowd head on. The shouting intensified when people saw her, questions hurled like weapons. Did you kill Lady Ashford? Are you going to marry the Duke? Do you feel guilty? How does it feel to get away with murder? Elara stopped at the gates, turned to face them. The guards tensed, ready to pull her back if things got violent. I didn't kill Lady Ashford, she said, voice carrying over the noise. I didn't kill my husband. I'm a woman who survived 5 years of abuse, who was framed for murder by someone trying to protect his family's reputation, and who fought like hell to prove the truth. That's all. That's the whole story. But the evidence was manufactured by Marcus Vance and a man he was blackmailing. All of that came out in trial. If you actually care about truth, go read the court transcripts instead of believing whatever the scandal sheets print. She turned and kept walking, guards flanking her. Behind her, the crowd was momentarily silent, processing. Then someone started clapping. It spread. Not everyone, but enough. Enough that by the time Elara reached the market, she felt something shift. Not acceptance, maybe, but acknowledgement. Recognition that she'd survived something terrible and come out the other side. At the market, people stared, whispered. Some turned away, refusing to acknowledge her, but others nodded. A few women even smiled, cautious, tentative smiles that said, "I see you, I understand." Elara bought bread and cheese and flowers like it was the most normal thing in the world. Like she wasn't a woman who'd been on trial for her life a week ago. Like she belonged here, because she did. She'd fought for that right, and no one was taking it from her. Marcus Vance's trial started 2 weeks later. The prosecution had a stronger case than they'd had against Elara. They had Pemberton's testimony. They had the letters between Marcus and Crane. They had financial records, witness statements, and a clear pattern of behavior showing Marcus would do anything to protect his family's reputation. What they didn't have was concrete proof that Marcus had personally killed anyone. "He's too smart," Whitmore explained to Elara and Rowan in a strategy meeting. "He never does his own dirty work. He pays people, threatens people, manipulates situations, but he's always one step removed from the actual crime." "So he'll walk," Elara said flatly. "Not necessarily. The circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. The jury just has to believe the pattern." Whitmore shuffled his papers. "But it would help if we could find direct evidence. Someone who saw Marcus with Crane the night he disappeared. Someone who can testify about specific threats or payments." "We've been looking for weeks," Rowan said. "Everyone who might have information is either too scared to talk or already dead." Elara thought about that. About Marcus's web of control, his network of people who did his bidding, about how he'd managed to hurt her even when she was locked in Newgate, supposedly safe from him. "What about the men who attacked me in prison?" she asked suddenly. "The ones who cut my face. They said Marcus sent them." "They disappeared after the trial," Rowan said. "Probably fled London the moment they realized you'd been acquitted. But someone hired them, someone paid them, and if Marcus used intermediaries..." Elara's mind was racing. "Then maybe those intermediaries are still around, still doing business, still available to testify if the price is right." Whitmore looked thoughtful. "It's worth investigating. If we can prove Marcus hired men to assault you in prison, that shows consciousness of guilt, shows he was trying to intimidate or silence you even after framing you for murder." "I'll put my investigators on it," Rowan said. The investigators came back with a name 3 days later. A man called Davies who operated as a fixer for wealthy families. Need someone hurt? Silenced? Disappeared? Davies was your man, as long as you could afford his rates, and Marcus Vance had been paying Davies for years. "We have bank records," the lead investigator told them, spreading documents across Rowan's desk. Regular payments from Marcus to Davies dating back 5 years. The amounts spike around key events, right before Crane disappeared, right after Lady Ashford's death, the day before Mrs. Vance was attacked in prison. "Can we connect him to specific crimes?" Rowan asked. "Davies is smart. He insulates himself, uses intermediaries just like Marcus does, but..." The investigator pulled out another paper. "We found one of the men who attacked Mrs. Vance. He's in debtor's prison in Bristol, and he's willing to testify that Davies hired him on Marcus's orders for the right price." "How much?" £500 and relocation to America after the trial." "Done." Rowan didn't hesitate. "Get him to London. Get his testimony recorded. Make sure he's protected until he can testify." The investigator nodded and left. Elara looked at the bank records, at the pattern of payments that told a story of systematic violence and intimidation. "This is it, isn't it? This is what we needed. It's close. If the man from Bristol testifies, if we can prove Davies was Marcus's agent, if the jury believes the pattern..." Rowan stopped, met her eyes. "Yes, this could be it." The man from Bristol was named Tom Fletcher. He was in his 30s, rough around the edges, with the kind of face that had seen too many fights. When they brought him to London, he looked terrified. "They'll kill me," he said, chain-smoking in the safe house where they'd stashed him. "Marcus Vance has people everywhere. Soon as I testify, I'm a dead man." You'll be on a ship to America the day after you testify, Rowan said. New name, new papers, enough money to start over. You'll be safe. Yeah? What about my family, my sister and her kids? They'll go with you, all arranged, all paid for. Fletcher studied Rowan, looking for lies, for traps. Finally nodded. All right. But if you're lying, if anything happens to my sister, nothing will happen. You have my word. Fletcher's testimony was scheduled for the third week of Marcus's trial. The prosecution built their case methodically, establishing the pattern of corruption, the financial connections to Crane, the timeline that showed Marcus had motive and opportunity for every crime, but it was all circumstantial until Fletcher took the stand. Elara attended the trial every day, sitting in the gallery where everyone could see her, where Marcus could see her. She wanted him to know she wasn't afraid anymore, wanted him to see exactly what his actions had created, a woman who refused to break. When Fletcher was called, the courtroom went silent. He told them everything. How Davies had approached him in a tavern, offered him £50 to rough up a woman in Newgate. How Davies had given him specific instructions: cut her face, make it visible, make sure she understood this was a message from Marcus Vance. Did you question these instructions? The prosecutor asked. Course not. £50 is £50. And Davies said the woman was a murderer anyway, said she deserved it. But you knew you were committing assault. Yeah, but I've done worse for less. Fletcher looked at Elara, and something like shame crossed his face. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, you didn't deserve that. During cross-examination, Marcus's lawyers tried to tear Fletcher apart, pointed out his criminal record, his debts, his obvious motivation to lie in exchange for money and relocation. But Fletcher held firm. I'm a lot of things, but I'm not a liar. Davies hired me. Marcus Vance paid him, that's the truth. After Fletcher, the prosecution called Davies himself. Davies had been arrested 2 days earlier on multiple charges of conspiracy and assault. He sat in the witness box looking resigned, like a man who knew his life was over and was just trying to minimize the damage. Yes, he testified when asked directly. Marcus Vance hired me for various tasks over the years, including arranging the attack on Mrs. Vance in Newgate. Did Mr. Vance specify what he wanted done? He said she needed to be taught a lesson, made to understand the consequences of going against his family. He wanted her marked so everyone would know what she was. And you arranged this attack? Yes, hired Fletcher and 3 others, paid them, gave them access to the prison through a guard on my payroll. The courtroom erupted. Marcus was shouting that Davies was lying, that he'd been coerced, that this was all part of Rowan's vendetta against him. But the evidence was there. The bank records matched Davies' testimony. Fletcher's account matched the attack Elara had suffered. And the pattern, the undeniable pattern of Marcus using violence and intimidation to control outcomes, was impossible to ignore. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, Elara was there. So was Rowan. So was Charlotte and Pemberton, and dozens of others whose lives had been touched by Marcus Vance's crimes. In the matter of the murder of William Crane, we find the defendant Marcus Vance guilty. In the matter of the murder of Lady Margaret Ashford, we find the defendant guilty. In the matter of conspiracy to commit murder and assault, we find the defendant guilty. Marcus's face went white, then red. Then he was screaming, fighting as the constables moved toward him. This is a travesty, a conspiracy. The Duke bought this verdict, bought all of you. The judge's gavel came down like thunder. Mr. Vance, you've been found guilty by a jury of your peers. You'll be sentenced to hang by the neck until dead. May you find whatever mercy awaits you. They dragged Marcus away, still screaming, still insisting on his innocence, still unable to comprehend that his carefully constructed world had finally collapsed. Elara watched him go and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a bone-deep weariness. It was over. Finally, truly over. The execution was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Elara didn't attend. She'd seen enough death, had no desire to watch another, even one that brought her justice. Instead, she was at Ashford Manor, helping Charlotte sort through Lady Margaret's things. It was strange, intimate work, touching the clothes and jewelry of a woman who'd tried to destroy her, who'd been killed because of her. She wasn't always cruel, Charlotte said quietly, folding a dress. When I was young, before father died, she was different, softer. But after, I think she just became afraid of losing status, of not being good enough, of the world changing and leaving her behind. Fear makes people do terrible things. It does, but it doesn't excuse them. Charlotte set down the dress, looked at Elara. I'm glad you're staying. Rowan is too, even if he's terrible at saying it. I haven't decided if I'm staying. Haven't you? Charlotte smiled. You could leave, go anywhere. Start completely over where no one knows your name or your history, but you're still here. Because she was. Despite everything, despite the trauma and the scars and the memories, Elara was still here, still in London, still at Ashford Manor, still in Rowan's orbit. I don't know what I'm doing, Elara admitted. I spent 5 years surviving Gerald, then months fighting Marcus, and now that it's over, now that I'm actually free, I don't know what that looks like. Then figure it out. You have time now. You have choices. Charlotte touched her arm. You've spent so long fighting just to stay alive. Maybe now you get to decide what kind of life you actually want. That night, Elara found Rowan in his study. He was at his desk as usual, working through correspondence, but he looked up when she entered. Can't sleep? He asked. Can't stop thinking. She moved to the window, looked out at the dark grounds. Marcus hangs in 2 days. After that, it's really over. No more trials, no more fighting. Just life. Is that frightening? Terrifying. She turned to face him. I don't know how to just live, Rowan. I've been in survival mode for so long, fight or flight, every day, every moment, and now there's nothing to fight, nothing to run from, and I don't know who I am without that. Rowan stood, crossed to her. Then we'll figure it out together. We'll take our time, try things, make mistakes. His hand came up to her scarred cheek, traced the line gently. You don't have to have all the answers right now. What do you want? She asked. From this, from us. What do you actually want? I want you to stay. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're here, safe, not looking over your shoulder. He stopped, struggled with words. I want what we could have had 5 years ago if the world had been different, if we'd been braver, if circumstances had been kinder. We can't go back. We're not those people anymore. No, we're better, stronger. We know what we're capable of surviving. He pulled her closer. I don't want the fairy tale, Elara. I want the reality. I want you, scars and trauma, and all the sharp edges you've grown. I want to build something real with you, not some fantasy of who we used to be. She kissed him. Let herself have this moment of wanting, of allowing herself to want. Let herself imagine a future that wasn't just about survival. When they broke apart, she said, I need time to figure out who I am now, to decide what I want my life to look like. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. What if I decide I don't want this, don't want London, don't want society, then I'll come with you, wherever you go, whatever you choose. He said it simply, like it was obvious. I let you face things alone once. I won't make that mistake again. Marcus Vance hanged on a cold Tuesday morning. The newspapers reported that he'd maintained his innocence to the end, that he'd cursed the Duke, cursed Elara, cursed the system that had condemned him, that he'd died badly, thrashing and choking, taking longer than usual to go still. Elara read the reports and felt nothing. Marcus was gone, erased, no longer a threat. The man who'd orchestrated so much pain, who'd killed to protect his family's reputation, who'd tried so hard to destroy her, reduced to a paragraph in the newspaper. She wondered if she should feel more, victory or relief or satisfaction. But mostly, she just felt tired. It's normal, Charlotte said, finding her in the garden that afternoon. The numbness after it's over. You've been running on rage and determination for so long. Now there's nothing left to do, so your body is just catching up. How do you know? Because I watched Rowan go through the same thing after father died. He'd been managing the estates, fighting political battles, doing everything to prove he was worthy of the title. And then one day it was done. He was the Duke, fully established, no more battles to fight, and he just stopped. Couldn't find a reason to get out of bed for weeks. What brought him back? You did. Or rather, the mystery of what happened to you. He needed something to fight for again, something to care about. Charlotte smiled. Now he has you back, and you have choices. So maybe it's time to figure out what's worth fighting for when you're not just trying to survive. That night, Elara made a list. Things she'd never been allowed to do. Things she'd dreamed about during those 5 years with Gerald, during the cold nights in Scotland, during the endless days in Newgate. Travel. She wanted to see places she'd only read about, wanted to go somewhere no one knew her name or her history. Study. She'd always loved learning, but women weren't allowed in universities. Maybe that was a rule that needed changing. Help others. Women like her, trapped in marriages, accused of crimes they didn't commit, struggling to survive in a world designed to crush them. Build something. Not just survive in the world as it was, but actually change it. When she showed the list to Rowan the next morning, he studied it carefully. University won't let women attend, he said. Then we'll create our own. A place where women can learn medicine, law, business, where they can become something other than wives and mothers if they choose. That would be revolutionary. Good. I'm done with conservative. She met his eyes. I survived the worst things these people could do to me. Now I want to use that. Want to make sure other women don't have to go through what I did. Can you support that? Can I support you wanting to change the world? Rowan smiled, real and warm. Yes. Obviously, yes. Though fair warning, the world will fight back, hard. Let it. I've been fighting my whole life. At least now I'm fighting for something that matters. 6 months later, they opened the first women's academy in London. It started small. A townhouse in Bloomsbury, 5 students, 3 instructors. Women teaching women mathematics, science, literature, law, subjects that were supposedly too complex for female minds. The newspapers called it scandalous, called Elara dangerous, radical, a threat to the social order. Said she was corrupting young women, destroying traditional values, undermining the natural order. Elara read the articles and laughed. After everything she'd survived, after hanging for a murder she didn't commit and fighting her way back to freedom, she was supposed to be afraid of bad press? The academy grew. More students, more instructors, more subjects. Women came from all over England, desperate for education, for opportunity, for a chance to be something more than decorative. Some were running from bad marriages like she had. Some were widows trying to survive. Some were just young women who wanted choices their mothers never had. Elara met with each one personally, told them her story, all of it, including the ugly parts. Let them see her scar, her past, her survival. The world will tell you you're not good enough, she told each class. Will tell you you're too weak, too emotional, too delicate for serious work. That's a lie. You're capable of extraordinary things. You just have to refuse to accept their limitations. The academy became her purpose, her way of turning survival into meaning. Every woman who learned, who grew, who left the academy capable and confident, that was a victory. That was proof that suffering didn't have to destroy you, that you could take the worst things that happened and forge them into something powerful. Rowan funded it all without question, helped find instructors, secured the building, dealt with the legal challenges. He'd become her partner in this, not just her protector. They still hadn't married. Everyone expected it, waited for the announcement. But Elara wasn't ready. Marriage meant giving up legal autonomy, meant becoming someone's property again in the eyes of the law. We don't have to, Rowan said when she tried to explain. I don't need a ceremony to know you're mine, to know I'm yours. Scandalous, Your Grace, living in sin with a known troublemaker. The scandal is what makes it interesting. He kissed her, slow and thorough. Besides, I've learned something in the last year. The people whose opinions actually matter don't care about scandal. And the people who care about scandal don't matter. 1 year after Marcus's execution, Elara received a letter. It was from Crane's widow. She'd remarried, moved to Wales, was raising her children in peace. But she wanted Elara to know something. My husband wasn't a bad man, the letter said. He was weak, and he was scared, and Marcus Vance exploited both. But in the end, he tried to do the right thing. The letters he wrote to Marcus, the ones that helped convict him, those were real. William wrote them because he couldn't live with the guilt. He was planning to go to the authorities, to confess everything. That's why Marcus had him killed. I don't know if that brings you any comfort, but I wanted you to know that even in the middle of that darkness, even when he was being used by evil men, my husband tried to find his way back to the light. He failed, but he tried. Thank you for getting justice for him, for my children, for yourself. Thank you for being strong enough to fight when everyone else just accepted the lies. Elara read the letter 3 times, then carefully filed it away with the other documents from that terrible time. Reminders of what she'd survived, proof that she'd won. She didn't need the reminders anymore. The scar on her face was reminder enough, but she kept them anyway. Not to dwell on the past, but to remember that the past had happened, that it was real, that she'd fought her way through it and emerged on the other side. That night, at a dinner celebrating the Academy's first year, Pemberton approached her. He looked better than he had in months, healthier, calmer. He'd resigned from Parliament after testifying, had retired to the countryside. "Mrs. Vance," he said, "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For showing me it was possible to change, to choose differently." He gestured to the room full of students and instructors. "What you're building here, it matters. It's important. And if I'd succeeded in destroying you, none of this would exist. You didn't succeed. That's what matters. Still, I'm sorry, for my part in it, for not seeing the truth sooner." Elara studied him. He was sincere. She could see that, genuinely remorseful for his actions. "You were brave when it counted," she said finally. "That's worth something." After he left, Charlotte sidled up next to her. "Are you ever going to stop collecting reformed villains?" "Probably not. Someone has to give them a second chance." "You're impossibly good, you know that?" "I'm practical. Forgiveness is cheaper than revenge, requires less energy." Elara smiled. "Though I reserve the right to hold grudges against the truly irredeemable. Like Marcus." "Like Marcus." They stood together watching the party. Students laughing, instructors discussing curriculum, supporters mingling. A room full of people who believed education mattered, who believed women deserved choices, who were willing to fight social norms to make it happen. A room full of people who existed because Elara had refused to give up, had refused to accept that powerful men could destroy her simply because they wanted to. "You changed things," Charlotte said quietly. "Really changed them. This academy, what you're teaching these women, it's going to ripple out. In 10 years, 20 years, they'll be doctors and lawyers and businesswomen. They'll change the world because you gave them the chance. I just opened a door. They're the ones walking through it. You opened a door everyone said should stay locked. That takes courage." Maybe it did. Or maybe it just took being too stubborn to accept no for an answer, too angry at injustice to let it stand, too determined to survive to let anyone make her small. Whatever it was, it had worked. She'd survived. She'd won. She'd built something that mattered, and standing there in a room full of women learning, growing, becoming, Elara finally felt what she'd been chasing for so long. Freedom. 2 years after Marcus's execution, Elara and Rowan finally married. It wasn't a grand society wedding, no elaborate ceremony, no hundreds of guests, no spectacle. Just a small gathering in the garden at Ashford Manor, Charlotte and a handful of Academy students as witnesses. A simple ceremony that took less than 10 minutes. But it mattered, because Elara was choosing it. Not being forced, not being trapped, not accepting the only option available. She was choosing Rowan, choosing this life, choosing to build something with someone she loved. The paperwork had been complex. Rowan's solicitors had drawn up documents ensuring Elara retained control of her own money, her own property, her own decisions. Protections that most wives never got, that most men would never allow. But Rowan understood that marriage was terrifying for someone who'd been trapped in one before. Understood that she needed guarantees, needed to know she could leave if she had to, needed to maintain her independence even while joining her life to his. "You know I'd never try to control you," he said after signing the documents. "Never try to limit you or tell you what you can and can't do." "I know, but the law doesn't know that, and I need the law on my side this time." She took his hand. "This isn't about not trusting you. It's about trusting myself enough to protect myself. Then I'm glad we did it. Glad you have that protection. After the ceremony, after the small celebration, after everyone had left, they stood together watching the sun set over the grounds. Are you happy? Rowan asked. Elara considered the question. Happy was such a simple word for such a complex feeling. She was scarred, traumatized, still had nightmares about Newgate and Gerald and hanging, still flinched sometimes at loud noises, still struggled with trusting people. But she was also free, building something meaningful. Loved by someone who saw all her sharp edges and broken pieces and valued her anyway. Surrounded by women who were becoming something extraordinary because she'd given them the chance. Yes, she said finally. I think I am. Not in the way I imagined when I was 19 and stupid, but in a way that's real, that I earned. Good. He pulled her closer. You deserve happiness. After everything, you deserve so much more than that. But happiness is a start. They stayed there as the sun finished setting, as stars began to appear in the darkening sky, as the world moved forward into whatever came next. Elara thought about the girl she'd been 5 years ago, desperate, trapped, convinced she'd never escape. Thought about what she'd tell that girl if she could. You're going to survive this. It's going to be hell, and you're going to want to give up 1,000 times, but you're stronger than you know, stronger than they think. And on the other side of all that darkness, you're going to build something extraordinary. You're going to win. And she had. Against impossible odds, against powerful men who wanted her destroyed, against a system designed to crush women who fought back. She had won. Not perfectly. Not without scars and trauma and losses that would never heal completely. But she'd won nonetheless. And standing there in the garden with Rowan beside her and the academy she'd built waiting for tomorrow's students, and a future that was finally, truly hers to shape, Elara Ashford, she was getting used to the name, felt something she'd never thought she'd feel again. Hope. Not the naive hope of youth that thought love conquered all and everything worked out in the end, but the hard-won hope of survival. The knowledge that even in the darkest moments, even when everything seemed lost, there was always a way forward if you refused to quit. That hope would carry her through whatever came next, through challenges and setbacks and the inevitable fights with people who didn't want the world to change. Because Elara had learned the most important lesson of all. She was capable of extraordinary things when she refused to accept anyone else's limitations. And she was done accepting limitations. The world better be ready for that.